Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in today's video I'm going to be going over some general purpose dungeon routes for the new seasonal affix Prideful. Now I say general purpose because none of these routes requires a specific class, and only one of them in Mists of Tirna Scithe requires a specific Covenant member in Night Fae for the entry level skip. Aside from this, the routes work on every single type of affix, so for a couple, notably Bolstering and Necrotic, there are some pulls you'll want to split into two, but I'll note those as I go over them. Aside from that, there are some classes that might help with certain types of CC for some small skips, but even if you're lacking those classes, you can always use Invis pots, which are quite cheap, at least on my server. Now, for the add-on I'm using here, it is Mythic Dungeon Tools, which I would 100% recommend to anyone looking to push in keys, as it lets you just kind of pre-plan the entire dungeon out beforehand, and of course you can share them between anyone else with the add-on. So if you grab this add-on, you can click the links in the description below to get these exact routes on your screen. Now with that said, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more content like it, and let's start off with the other side, the very first dungeon we've got here. So start off, we actually are pulling around the entire circle here, and that is to get good Prideful spawns. That is the entire reason for this. So this first pull, we tend to actually use cooldowns here, and then we tend to use Bloodlust for this second pull here. Again, a very important thing is getting your Bloodlust on cooldown, even if you feel like it's not fully optimal in the pack you're using it on, because you want to get in as many Bloodlusts as you can to reach that timer. So we Bloodlust this pull here. Depending on this pattern, how dangerous you're feeling, you can get this guy in with this pack and Bloodlust as well, but I don't always recommend that. Your Prideful is going to spawn here in this fourth pack, so make sure it's dying close together so you don't get your Prideful like halfway through the pack. That can always be very, very dangerous. And then you're moving up here. If you don't have a Night Fae in your group, I recommend just splitting this into two pulls, just because the Night Fae with the urn, which is right there, it really does help with this pull, to complete this pull overall. Then you move on to the Ardenweald area, where you're doing a bunch of double pulls here, because none of this trash is particularly dangerous. You're pulling these two together, you're pulling these two together here, and I believe you actually get your Prideful in this pack here. So just be careful again to make sure that pack goes down together, and then you can pull your cranes. Again, you can just pull these three, they'll do their Shrieking Cry and they'll pull the rest of them, which is what you want anyway, so no need to interrupt it. And then you'll deal with this pack. This one is a little bit dangerous because the Matriarch will enrage all of the other cranes, so when that happens, you'll probably want to drop like a CC, like a Binding, or Ursul's Vortex, stuff like that, just so your tank can kite away for that one moment. And then we'll just moving on here, there's another urn here, much less mandatory. It doesn't really help that much. You're just pulling the padding crane with the invisible guys here and killing them there. And then you're jumping along the waterfall and down, and you're pulling this pack here. Note that this area can get a little sketchy with any affixes that require you to have space. So things like Sanguine, things like Spiteful, things like Storming, it can be a little sketchy. It's still doable. You still do this pull every time. You just need to be careful because you're trapped in on both sides. So just be very careful there. You're then pulling this last pack, and again, your Prideful spawns partway through, so try and AoE it down together, and then you have Prideful for Dealer Zyxa. Now this boss is very, very dangerous on tyrannical weeks, just because of the high amount of damage coming out, right? There's a ton of damage from the Arcane Lightning, and for those unaware, the Arcane Lightning will always jump to the nearest player. So you can actually choose exactly who this jumps on, and you need to bounce it between 3 players in order to make sure that their debuffs aren't refreshed. So that is the one thing I see a lot of groups messing up on, is the Arcane Lightning debuff. So that, if you focus on dealing with that, choose 3 players to bounce it between, just bounce it between the 3 of you, you'll be fine. It is still a ton of damage, and again, your Bloodlust should be back up for this, since we used it very early on. So Bloodlust, Prideful, get them down, and make sure you have 3 people to bounce the lightning between. From there, you're running all the way down to the Mechagon area. Nothing super notable about these trash pulls. Just make sure you're LOSing the Defunct Dental Drill. Make sure you're getting as many interrupts on these headless clients as you can. They can really, really mess up Meelee's day, so be careful. And then there is actually, over here, if you're an engineer, you can actually turn off the Slime Frogger. So if you are an engineer, you can help up your group a lot with this little room. And then you're moving on. Your Prideful spawns right there. I believe. Yes, right there. So again, be careful with your kills. I believe the first slime killed spawns the Prideful, and then you can take that into the boss room. Again, the other thing I see a lot of groups not doing for the Mana Storm bosses is using their abilities against them. So the Laser Beam, if you have Millhouse in the middle, it will stun him. The Shadow Fury for Maleficent, it will stun her as well. So make sure you're using those to your advantage to mitigate the boss damage. Once you get them down, you're moving on to your second last boss in Hakar. And the one thing here, devoted ads, make sure they never get their cast off, because those Hakar ads really do hurt. You don't want to deal with them, so just make sure you're interrupting them with stuns. Any form of CC really works. And then Night Fae here, I believe the urn is right there. So if you don't have a Night Fae, I don't recommend doing this big of a pull. Split this into like 2. But if you do have the Night Fae, you can just group them all up on top of the urn and nuke them down. Then you have the last pull here. And the other thing to note in this hallway is that these Deathwalker ads, they die, they turn into ghosts. When they do that, you can actually just purge the ghosts and they die. So that's another little useful tip. And then once this whole pack dies, you'll get your last Prideful. You'll bring it into a car. Bloodlust should be up again here. If it's not too big a deal. I would definitely say using Bloodlust on this guy on Tyrannical Week is good. On Fortified Weeks, you can actually go back and Bloodlust on Maleficent, and then you can Bloodlust on the last boss's Shades. But on Tyrannical Week, you may want to save Bloodlust for Hakar. Now, the big thing for Hakar that people don't really know is that the Blood Shield he uses, it does gain shielding based on the damage done. So yes, it will damage ads, but also if you pop a DR or an immunity of any kind, you can actually greatly reduce the amount the shield has. So that can actually speed up the fight a lot over the course of a Tyrannical boss fight, which is very long, right? So keep that in mind. Use DRs, things like AMS, even any magic resistance works as well, so that is very helpful. And then you just come back in and you have to deal with Muzela. And it's a fairly straightforward fight. Again, it can be very difficult, especially on like Grievous weeks. That fight is very painful. But pretty much just split up your group into 4 and try and save cooldowns for those ads and one phase them, and that's the way to go for that fight. All right, that's the other side. So moving on, we have Halls of Atonement. Similar idea here. We're just double pulling. Be very careful of the Gargan Bleed. Depending on the level and the type of tank you have, you'll need to be kiting these anywhere from 2 stacks of the bleed to 5 stacks of the bleed, depending. And make sure that the Houndmaster has the Loyal Beast cast stunned or CC'd in some way. Otherwise, your tank is going to have a bad time. These Loyal Stoneborns, that's the Venthyr ability. This is one of the strongest abilities. Again, you don't need it. It's not mandatory, but it will make your life a lot easier. They deal a ton of damage, and they can also be, if you have a priest and a Venthyr member, you can power infuse them to deal even more damage. We then have this big pull here, again, more Houndmasters. The Depraved Obliterators, they have, I think it's Curse of Obliteration is their spell, but they have a curse spell. That's the one you'll want to prioritize kicking, as it can deal a ton of damage. And then you come into the first Shard, which you'll want to Bloodlust on, just to get it on cooldown. Again, this Shard, it can be outranged, actually, the Thrash. So you can have your ranged, and even your healer, just stand a little bit back. I think it's just over 40 yards is the ranged on it. You can actually just stand out of the range and completely mitigate that damage. Makes your life a lot easier. I do want to note here, do your best not to body pull these guys here and these guys in the back, just because it will screw up your Prideful timings a little bit. So try to avoid that as best you can. So your Prideful will actually spawn on the death of the Shard. So you don't have to worry too much about cleaving. You can focus down the Obliterators, get the Collector down, and then focus the Shard. And that'll spawn your Prideful. And then you'll use that Prideful for the other Shard. Again, you don't have to pull these right away. You can wait if on affixes like Necrotic or Sanguine even. You can just pull these right after or when the Shard is up, because they can be a little annoying. And then you'll jump down onto this pack here. Be careful, there is a pat right here, so you don't have too much space. And this will spawn Prideful for your next Shard. And then you'll deal with this pack here. There's another Loyal Stoneborn. And now this pat, you can actually dodge it by jumping over the gates. And also a hunter can trap this Houndmaster, and they'll just stop moving. So you can just CC them out of the way and just run right past them. You've got this for the boss, and I believe this is also Prideful. Yeah, so this will spawn your last Prideful for the boss. This boss isn't terribly difficult on Tyrannical. It's just make sure you've got the space, try and drop your puddles nearby, and obviously you have your tank move out when there's too many puddles in your circle, so you're still dodging. From there, you've got, you just pull these guys up the stairs. We do anyways because we have a vent there, so we get the Loyal Stoneborn for this pull. You can drag these guys back, and I would just wait for these ankle biters to actually pat towards you, like they end up around here. And so you want to pull those there so you don't get these extra packs. From there, you want to watch this Stoneborn Slasher, and you want to run up here when he pats away, because you can actually just run straight up and hug these stairs and end up here with only these 3 mobs. Sometimes you can even skip this mob, but we use them for percent here. So once these 3 die, it actually spawns your Prideful up here, and then you'll face the boss. Again, this boss is not too difficult. We do use Bloodlust here just because we have it, because we used it early. But you just want to generally have your range stay away for the puddles and then get in for the ads. And then you can kick any far away ads to stack them all up, AoE them down, and then the person that gets the stomp, you can actually Curse Dispel them. If you have a Curse Dispel, and they're free to move the whole time, and they can just position themselves to get all the ads smashed, and then you don't have to deal with them until the next wave. From there, this is a pretty scary pack for your tank. Again, 3 dogs, very scary. Expect to have to kite this pack. It's the way it is. And then you'll move in. You've got this 4-pack. We pull them on top of this Stoneborn. Again, we have a vent there. And then we have the second Stoneborn for the boss itself. And this is very straightforward, right? Kite the ghost to the pillars. The pillars will respawn over the course of the Tyrannical fight, so this doesn't become a race. And then just keep the kicks, and that's all you got to do. From there, you move on to the last room. Again, nothing notable here. The Inquisitor will spawn the Prideful when he dies, and then you've got that for the last boss and Bloodlust as well. For this guy, again, for the actual pillars he throws, you can look at their face, and wherever direction they're facing, that is where they're going to get thrown. So just watch that and get out of the way. Then for the actual beams, you can stand between the pillars inside the boss's hitbox and actually double soak. So your tank should always be double soaking, and then you can either have 2 soaks for your remaining 2 players with personals, or you can do something like an immunity and double soak as well, which is very useful. So you can have only 2 people soaking all 4 beams, which definitely helps on the damage there for your healers. Alright, moving on. Mists of Tirna Scythe. So this is the one dungeon I definitely recommend having a Night Fae for. That's for the skip right there. Just because there's really no other way. I mean, you can Invispot right on pull. So I guess it's not super mandatory. But that may give you problems over here, which I'll explain in a bit, if you don't have the correct CCs. So, these Spike Claws, make sure they're purged or Mass Dispelled or something, like Blood Elf Arcane Torrented, just because they are they have a buff on them that I believe they deal a bunch of party damage when they die if you don't dispel it. So just nuke them down, or dispel them rather, and then nuke them down. And then you'll move on to this pack. Watch the Villager, he has that frontal cleave, and if you actually pull it just slightly around this corner, the Overgrowth ability, which is that single target stun on a player, can actually be LOS'd. You can have your ranged LOS it if they get it. From here, this pack. So this pack right here can be skipped. The way to do that is you need some sort of sap. So sap works for rogues. You need Mind Soothe for priests works. Paralysis for Demon Hunter works. And I'm not 100% sure Repentance for paladins might work here as well. But pretty much things like Freezing Trap, Polymorph, Hex, those will put you in combat if you run by the ad. Whereas the ones that I just mentioned won't. So you need one of those CCs. If you don't have one of those CCs, Invispot, right? Invispot will work just fine, but that means again that you probably can't have Invispotted here, so you still need the Night Fae. So one or the other, you either Invispot this if you don't have the Night Fae and you use the CC here, or you have the Night Fae and you don't have the CC and you Invispot there, or you have both. Either way, doable if you have at least one. Preferably you have both, but not the end of the world. Make sure you pick up your stat shrooms here. deal with this pack, and then your Prideful will spawn on the second death here, so no need to kill them together. And again, you probably don't want to kill them together because of their big AoE, which again can be outranged, but it's a bigger range. I think it's like 60 yards or something, maybe 50 yards. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it can be outranged. From there, we have the boss. We have the boss, again, face him away, keep him kicked. That's all we really got to do with that fight. And then we have the maze. So, I just kind of put in a general purpose, one possible option for the maze. This is likely not the route you're going to get. You're going to end this maze with a random percent, somewhere between, what is it, like 75 and 85, I think. Depending on your RNG. You can get between 1 and 2 Pridefuls in this maze. So that'll affect what you're pulling later on in the dungeon. There's no way to predict what you're going to get. It is what it is. Note that for this first pack, you can actually mark or set Mistcaller as your focus right here, and she will run in the direction that is correct. So for example, she can run through this door, and you'll know right off the bat that that is the correct door. You don't even need to look at it. Setting her as focus, you can actually see which way she goes in the second room as well. But from there, she despawns, so it doesn't help you. But yeah, you could see her if you have her as your focus, come all the way up here and through to this room, so you know the first 2 correct rooms, which can make your life a little bit easier. Mistcaller herself, again, fairly straightforward boss, right? CC the foxes, go make sure that your tank is kicking her, and make sure you're killing the correct clone. And that's about it. And then we go down here where this trash is a lot easier than the entry level trash. So you just kind of breeze your way through here. Your Prideful is over here. Is your Prideful? Well, in this case, but this is going to depend on your actual trash percentage after the maze. But if you need to, you can pull extra packs here and here at the end, depending on if you got more or less trash in the maze, just so you have Prideful for Tredova. Tredova, again, can be a little rough on Tyrannicals. Things can get a bit hectic. There's a lot of swirlies going out near the end of the fight. You want to lust with Prideful. And I do recommend not kicking Consumption. So Consumption is just that channeled party-wide damage cast. And because she doesn't do any of her other abilities, it actually makes the fight a bit easier, assuming your healer can handle it. So just try not to kick that, and just only kick it if your healer really needs to, so they can catch up. That's enough for Mists. Let's move on to Plaguefall, where we have another dungeon where you want to get Lust on cooldown fairly quickly. So on Fortified Weeks, we actually double pull these first 2 packs here, and we Bloodlust. On Tyrannical Weeks, we'll save it for Globgrog. Yeah, otherwise you want to get it down ASAP. Just be careful of these Stormers. You want to make sure you're stunning or CCing their Fungal Storm, and you want to make sure you're interrupting the growth from the Mancers. Now you move on. There is a line right here. You can dodge both of these packs without anything else. You just need to walk straight. So just be careful there. And then this pack, again, depending on the affixes, you may want to split this into 2 pulls just down the middle. Things like bolstering can be a little sketchy, right? Necrotic Inspiring combo that we just had can be a little sketchy for this pull. So yeah, just be careful. And you've got these guys, these Belchers. And then you have the Prideful for Globgrog. So again, we're lusting Globgrog on Tyrannical Weeks, just to get them down ASAP. And note that the big slimes can actually be CC'd with things like Entangling Roots, things like Freezing Trap, right? Those kind of things. So we actually just CC them and ignore them the whole fight. We'll get 2 usually, sometimes 3. On the third one, so we can keep 3 CC'd, so that's fine for our comp. But depending on your comp, you may or may not be able to keep them CC'd. And then we focus on the little guys. So if you can't keep them CC'd, make sure you kill them. If you can, it's a lot of damage, you save yourself, so CC them and ignore them. We then move on down here to the Slime Claws and the Spine Breakers. And then we have the Rigged Plague Borers. These guys, when they blow up on death, they actually do damage add, so use that to your advantage here. And then we'll have the next Prideful is down around here once you get the Pat in. after these guys. Oops, that's fine. Right, those guys will be your Prideful, and then you're moving on with Prideful to here, and then you have the little gauntlet. Right, so just be careful in this gauntlet, guys. Again, you have the two dudes running. Again, their detonations will damage the tentacles if they happen on the tentacles. And they also will damage the mini-boss if they happen on the mini-boss. So you can try and stack them on top of him, and they'll blow up, and they'll deal a ton of his HP and damage. So it's always nice to have. You're then moving down, you're clearing this trash. Again, nothing notable, and you're bloodlusting this boss. Another thing for the purple slimes on this boss, remember they do a damage reduction aura. So you can actually have like a knockback and then CC them. So again, if you have a hunter, you can knock them back and then freezing trap them. Druids, knock them back and then roots them. All those things work. And you can just ignore them again, the whole fight. You can just ignore those purple ads as long as they're away from both the boss and the explosive ads. Right, and then you're moving down. Nothing extremely notable here. Again, similar trash. You guys have seen all this before. Where is he? The ambusher, when he spawns the little spiders, you want to watch where he spawns them and use some form of CC on them. Like an AoE stun, an AoE disorient. AoE fears are a little scary up here because they can fear them into these packs. Similar with knockbacks. Can use a knockback, but make sure you're knocking it back in the correct direction. But otherwise, if you don't interrupt them, they're just going to insta one-shot one or more people in your party. So make sure you're getting them. You can then hug there's a little platform over here you can hug and dodge this stealth guy. You can't see him, but you can walk right between these packs. You pull this spawns your Prideful, and then you'll move it together with this guy. And then you got Demeana. So Demeana is actually very straightforward once you figure out how to deal with it. So for the stealth ads, any kind of area effect targeted ability will bring them out of stealth. So things like hunter traps, things like demon hunter sigils, right? Those kinds of abilities, you can just shoot them on the circle, like on the center of the circle, and it'll break them out and they'll run right to you. So those can be very useful, right? Just having a hunter or having one of those range classes. Even Door of Shadows from Venthyr works, right? So you can just have one of those guys break out the far away stealth ads, and then you have your tank just run around and get the close ones, and that just makes their life a lot easier. With that fight done, we'll move downstairs, and we've got Margrave. This is a rough fight on your healers, right? That disease that stacks up, the rain, it hurts. It hurts a lot, especially on Tyrannical Week. So what you need to do is pretty much use cooldowns effectively. So we had Prideful for this, right? This timing lets you get Prideful for the first phase. So we use Prideful and cooldowns. That lets us interrupt the first rain because he will always go on his health threshold, 66 and 33%. Always, even if he's mid-rain cast, it will interrupt the rain cast, which will reduce its damage greatly. So we are able to interrupt that first rain cast. We can then Bloodlust in phase 2 when he comes back out and only get one rain cast. Make sure healers' cooldowns are there, even personals, guys, because those really hurt. And then you have the last phase, which cooldowns are back up for, at least on higher tyrannical keys. Which again, you only get one rain if you're doing this correctly in each phase. You can survive 2 in like the second and the third phase. And I would say if you're not able to skip that second rain in the second phase, then move Lust to the third phase to make that phase nice and easy. But really, this is all about getting dodging tentacles. Again, you can't have tentacle deaths, and then using personals and cooldowns to survive those rains. And that's Plaguefall done. We move on to Sanguine Depths. Another dungeon that, again, the Venthyr ability here, very, very strong. Not needed, but it definitely helps a lot. The Venthyr abilities are very powerful. So what we do here is there is a Venthyr little container there, right? So we just pull these packs together on top of the container, get some stacks to move on to this bigger scary pull, and then we'll deal with that. And then here you just need to pull this one Gluttonous Tick, and you can actually wait for this brute to kind of pat around to here, and then you can just have your party hug this wall and move in without aggroing him, without needing any form of CC, nothing. Just wait for the pat to move around. And then you'll get your first Prideful spawn here for this boss. Now this boss is pretty tough on both Tyrannical and Fortified, so we do use Bloodlust with Prideful on him. Do note that for his smash that leaves the orbs behind, some more mobile range specs like hunters, like mages, and like locks with their double gateway, they can actually outrange it. So it's about 80 yards is the range, but if they get 80 yards away, they actually don't take the damage and they don't spawn an orb, which is going to really, really help out your healers in that phase. Really useful. So if you can do it, do it. Otherwise, you'll just need to stagger your soaks on the orbs to not murder your entire party. From there, you're just moving through this hallway. Chamber Sentinels really, really hurt on fortified weeks. Watch their cleave melee. And tanks, just be aware that they're going to cleave and leave a bleed on you. That hurts a lot. And then this pat, another gargoyle pat, you want to avoid him. So you may need to wait for this pull here until he starts leaving, because you want to LOS pull this right here, because there is another Venthyr container. This will also spawn your Prideful, and then you can take that in and absolutely annihilate these packs here. From there, you're just moving down. Be careful of the Remnants of Fury, needs to be kicked. And this guy here, the Vestige of Doubt, you'll want to stun his cast, CC his cast, just because it does leave a big puddle on the ground. I believe there's another container around here. You can get a couple stacks. It's not super useful, but it does help a little bit. And then you'll end up coming eventually to Tarvold. Tarvold is a rough fight as well. You'll want Bloodlust for this, for sure. And then you'll want to have, hopefully, some class that can cheese his Castigate ability. Now, what are those abilities that can cheese it? So you got Spell Reflect. If you do it as he's targeting you before he finishes the cast, you'll take no damage. Hunters, after the cast hits you, you can feign, mages can invis, rogues can vanish, and then obviously there's immunities that work as well. So paladins can bubble themselves, ice block, turtle, those kind of things all work. Otherwise, just pop a defensive, and again, make sure that's not cleaving, because that is the biggest problem for this fight. Is making sure your Cascade isn't murdering your friends, and then you just hard focus the ad whenever it spawns. Moving downstairs, nothing too notable here. I believe you get your Prideful. Let's see. Oh, you get your Prideful in this room, right? This pack is a little scary as well because it has a Mistdancer, an Overseer, and a Sentinel. So that's good to have a Prideful for. And then you've just got the Call hallway. So we tend to move up to the next pack when this whole pack is dead, even though we'll still have Call for that. We'll just keep moving. Then we'll get rid of Call here, kill the pack, keep moving. And then for this pack, we actually LOS them to here because there's another Venthyr canister, and you can get a ton of stacks there. Because I believe the dogs that keep spawning also count. So that's really nice. You can get a nice big buff for this last Call pack. Finish off the last Sentinel pack, and then your Prideful spawns there. And then you've got Call. For his Wicked Dash, I believe the ability is called, you can actually dodge the bleed application. If you're the second player, right? If you just keep moving as the second targeted player, you can dodge the area of effect, which means you dodge the bleed. Or if you're a hunter, mage, rogue, I believe you can feign, invis, vanish again to dodge it, but that's a little harder to do. It's quite difficult. So you can try and do that, but it won't always work. That's Sanguine Depths done. Moving on to Spires of Ascension. So, just start off with this double pull. You can have your entire party LOS right here behind the pillar or there similarly. And that works. You can just group them all together and get them all down. And then you'll move on. And I believe this pack here is where we Bloodlust on fortified weeks. This will also spawn your Prideful. On tyrannical weeks, we'll Bloodlust on the boss herself. With the Prideful buff, but otherwise it's a good Bloodlust, I think, because this pack can get a little scary, especially if you don't kill it together, because I believe the Prideful spawns on the third unit killed here. So just be a little careful there, and then you're just moving up, and you're pretty much clearing everything here just to get percent. Note that where is he? The champions, the menders, and then there's another unit later on. They'll put a weapon buff on themselves. If you dispel that weapon buff, it'll actually drop a weapon on the ground that you can step on that gives you a similar buff for a few attacks. So note, be aware of that. Melee, try and pick that up if it's ever dispelled, and make sure you are dispelling them if you have an offensive dispel. Your next Prideful spawns here, which you can use for this big pack. And then you just keep moving forward. Be very careful of these stealthies here, yeah? If you don't have some way to get them out, make sure your tank is running first and not getting murdered. And then for this, you can pull these Ether Divers without the Goliath. So wait for this middle diver to get pat slightly away from the Goliath, and then you can use a ranged attack to pull it back to you, and that won't pull the Goliath, and that'll spawn your Prideful, and then you can pull the Goliath with this pat over here to use that Prideful effectively. The Kyrian Spear is, I believe, right there for you guys to pick up, and you're going to use that later on. Here we have this big pack here. We used cooldowns for this pack, and then we skirted around the boss room, just around the side. And we used Bloodlust on this pull on Fortified Weeks. So Bloodlust here. This spawns your Prideful. And we used the Spear as kind of like a pseudo tank cooldown, like halfway through this pull, just so that the tank could have some breathing room and the healer could catch up. So we use a Spear, it'll spawn the Prideful, and we use the Prideful on Ventanax. And obviously on Tyrannical, like I said, we're lusting here as well with the Prideful. From there, we have this little skip. So if you have a rogue, obviously you can just shroud up. Otherwise, you can hug this wall, not pull this guy, and then walk around the pillar. You can jump down here, and then you can walk up here, and you can use any of those saps kind of things that I called for mists. So sap works, Mind Soothe works, Demon Hunter works, DC works, Imprison. And maybe Repentance, again, not 100% sure, haven't tested it. And then you can jump up the side of these stairs right here. There's a little lip you can jump up on, and you can skip all this trash. Now, apparently, this is doable still without using Mind Soothe. You just jump up like here instead of up there. I'm not 100% confident on it. I would definitely recommend either if you don't have one of those, just invis potting it, or only doing this if you have one of those CCs, because it can be a little scary. With that done, you have this pack here, which is, these are the Wardens, these are that other unit I was talking about that have the weapon buff you can dispel, and then you just want to make sure you're keeping kicks on the Justicars and the heals, and then you're moving up to the boss. For Aurifrion, immunities are nice for the Orb Soak, so they can help your tank out a lot, let them not get too many stacks, but aside from that, fairly straightforward fight. And then you're moving up here to Davos' platform. On Fortified Weeks, we actually pull these two guys together and we Bloodlust. That can be a little scary. You don't have to do that, because remember, you have to kill these within a couple % of each other. Otherwise, the one that's still alive will go back to full health. So they have to die very, very close. You basically treat it as bolstering, but they have to die very, very close together. If you're too scared of that, just pull one at a time. That's perfectly fine. And then you have a Davos. She works similar to kind of Margrave is what we do for her, where we have cooldowns for the first phase. We do the intermission, we Bloodlust the second phase on Tyrannical Weeks, and then third phase there's cooldowns back up again. But it's very straightforward, so nothing too complicated there. Then got Necrotic Wake. Now this one becomes a little bit more complicated. So Fortified Weeks, this is a big pull. It is a big pull. We Bloodlust this pull on Fortified Weeks. You can, especially on Tyrannical Weeks when you're not using Bloodlust, split this into two pulls. Right there. It's not a big deal. You can do that. Make sure you grab the hammer here, and the spear, I believe, is back there. For this pull on Fortified Weeks, we are hammering that Vanguard because he absolutely trucks your tank. And then this will spawn a Prideful. You can do that with the boss. On Fortified Weeks, we pull this red pack with the boss, and the Kyrian buff is right here. You can grab that Kyrian buff with right after Prideful. Do this on Fortified Weeks. We do it all together. On Tyrannical Weeks, you probably want to wait for this pat and pull it over here and do it before the boss. And then you'll go in with Bloodlust on the boss on Tyrannical Weeks and Kyrian buff. But otherwise, Fortified Weeks, it is safe with the exception of like Necrotic and Bolstering again. So on Necrotic and Bolstering, don't do that. But otherwise, you can do that. From there, we have the pull these together on the back, and you can just skirt around these gatekeepers, right? These gatekeepers are quite scary. So you just kind of skirt around the edge of the platform, and you're good. There's another Kyrian buff here, which you'll want to do again after you pull both of these packs, because this is your Prideful, right? Which one? It's these guys, these two. So you'll pull these two, You do this, you'll get your Prideful. You'll move on down. This is a pretty spooky pack. You'll get your Curian buff, your Prideful. Make sure you pick up the Anima Orb around there. And then you come to this skip. This is another Mind Soothe Sap, Demon Hunter in Prison, Repentance kind of skip. So make sure you either have one of those in your group or you're invis-potting it. Right? Those are your two options there. There is a hammer here, and there is a spear here. So make sure you're getting those. And you're moving up, and you've got these two guys. Marauders, again, they're quite scary. Watch the cleave, melee, and tanks. And make sure you're focusing the one with the bone shield up, because if you shatter that bone shield, it deals a ton of damage to them. You're then moving over here, Necromancer packs. Just like with the first Necromancer pack, all the other ads, they're not real. They're not real. So you kill the Necromancer, they all die. You just need to keep kicks on the mage, and they can be CC'd with things like Shackle or even like Control Undead from Death Knights. They can yoink them too. So do that. You've then got your another Curian buff there. And then you can pull that into this pack. And yeah, so this right here, after this guy, will be your Prideful. You may want to just pull them off to the side here because you don't want the mini boss. And then you've got the hammer here. And you've got a spear here. And then you're moving up, killing these guys. This is another pack that has two mages in it. So if you have some CC for them, any kind of CC really works on them. Freezing Trap, all those things. So we double CC the mages and just pull the Necromancer back and just nuke the Necromancer. On fortified weeks, it's not necessarily wrong to use a hammer on them, but I wouldn't use any of the other things. There is an orb hidden behind the golem there, so don't forget that. And then you've got Amarth, who is a very rough boss on tyrannical weeks especially, but even on fortified, he's not a pushover. So what you want to do is, one, make sure you're lusting. Lust is very important. Two, make sure you're using those spears. So you've got one spear here, 2, 3 spears, and then you'll have 2 anima orbs. So chain those spears. They do have a damage taken increase, I believe, on them. So chain those spears through the Bloodlust. For the first ad spawn, I would definitely recommend using the anima orb and just having your tank normally has the anima orb. Just drag it on top of the mages and that'll just chain kick them. But really making sure those mages are kicked and then they're nuked down. Worst case, if those ads are hard CC'd during the harvest, they won't insta-wipe you, right? They won't trigger the big AoE damage. If they're hard CC'd with things like Freezing Trap, things like Shackled, you can do that. That does work. So you can do that if you're running behind on the ads. Otherwise, though, I definitely recommend just staggering the anima orbs for those for that phase. So using the first on the first ad phase and the second on the second ad phase, and just chaining those spirits with Bloodlust and getting him down ASAP. Then you fly up to the Stitchworks, which is some very, very scary trash for your tank. So who is it? The Corpse Collectors, I believe. It's the Flesh Crafters, I think, that have the axes, right? It's one of them. One of the Corpse Collectors or the Flesh Crafters have the axes, which you'll want to make sure you kick. Actually, I think Corpse Collector has the double kicks. So he has the AoE party damage and the single target damage that you'll want to kick. The axe is something you want to make sure hits another trash mob because it just deals damage to the first thing it hits. So make sure you're pointing that towards a trash mob. And then you've got these Curian Stitchworks, which will put a stacking armor shred on your tank and then use Mutilate, which is like a huge hit, huge physical hit. So you want to make sure that your tank is able to reset stacks in some way. So one of the ways we've done that, if you don't have like a monk or a demon hunter that can easily drop their own stacks just by creating huge distance, you can just have a melee DPS or a hunter warlock pet taunt off for the armor shred debuff, not for mutilate. Mutilate will one-shot them, so you want to taunt off for the armor shred debuff and then have your tank taunt back just so their armor shred debuffs can drop stacks. And that's the main thing you want to make sure you're doing for these packs. Your Prideful spawns here, and then your Prideful spawns on the second mini boss just before the boss himself. So make sure that you are prepared for that. For this boss, you don't actually want to pump this creation too hard because you want him to get 3 hooks off. He needs to be low, but you don't want to kill him quite yet. So you want to get him down and just stop DPS on him around like 10% health, and then once he gets his third hook off, you can kill him. But the reason for that is because he has very good hook timings. So his first hook, obviously you get the boss down. His second hook will interrupt the boss's fixate, and then his third hook, the boss will still be down when he casts his third hook, but he will jump up halfway through the hook, so you can preemptively aim the hook at the top of the boss's platform and instantly bring him back down, at which point then you kill the golem, because then there's going to be a second one, and you don't want two up for that fight. But that first one does have very good timing, so try and use that to your advantage. And from there, you're just moving up to the top of the necropolis, and you've got Nalthor. Again, this is a fairly straightforward fight. Don't stand in the bad stuff, and run through the gauntlet when you can, and that's about it. Nothing insane here, and no really big tips for that. And then we have our last dungeon, Theater of Pain. So, this gets a little interesting. You can pull this 3-pack alone, and then for this guy, actually, you want to wait. You don't want to kill him immediately. So what you want to do is either, if you have Hunter Mage Rogue in your group, you can have them pull him off to the right side, and then Vanish, Invis, Feign, while the rest of your party runs up the left side past him. Or you can, if you don't have one of those, you can just death run with one player. Just have one player, they get to die, they'll run to the right, they'll die to the ad, everyone else run to the left, and then they'll res him after. And you're doing this because this allows you to fix your percents inside the dungeon, and also it lets you get your Prideful for more Dretha later on at the end. So that's very, very good. So do this if you can. This boss is very straightforward. We tend to kill, I believe it's Sathel first on everything but Necrotic Weeks. Necrotic Weeks we kill Desia first. But that's what we do there. And then here, very important. So you're going to kill 3 spirits first. That is the first thing you do. Just pull this 3-pack. That's it. That'll fix your percents. And then you'll go through Zav's Wing. You'll get your first Prideful, I believe, there. And then you'll get your second Prideful there. The banner for the Necrolords is there. There's one here as well. Don't use this right off the bat. Just wait. Use this one. You'll get your Prideful for the boss. Definitely lust the first boss, by the way, so you won't have your lust here. Lust on that first boss. And then you'll move into the Necromancer Wing, Koltharok. Definitely want to Invispot this part. Just for, again, this is just to fix percent. This trash isn't particularly hard. This is to fix your percent to get good Prideful spawn. You can Shroud if you have a Rogue. Otherwise, I would definitely recommend Invispotting. It's not the end of the world. What this basically means, if you have to kill these, is that you don't get Prideful for this boss, and you don't get Prideful for the last boss, which are the 2 hardest bosses in the dungeon. So you really want to try and get them, get Pridefuls for them, as it'll make your life a lot easier. So you'll Invispot this. You have the Portal Guardian, put it in the right socket. You'll go here, nothing notable. Jump down here, kill the Portal Guardian, left socket. Then you have the double tornado guys. Just be careful, watch the big tornadoes, make sure you're sidestepping them. Then you'll end up here. Another tornado guy, smaller platform, be very careful. It spawns your Prideful. You'll kill your Prideful on the platform. You've got Bloodlust and Prideful for Koltharok. So that's, just, again, a very spooky fight. You can, especially on Tyrannical Weeks, you can have Hunters. Again, there's a lot of stuff Hunters can do. They can feign the soul debuff that goes on 2 people to trigger the damage a little earlier. I believe Vanish and Invis work as well. It'll still trigger the spell. You're not dodging any damage, but it staggers the damage, and because on Tyrannical Weeks it's a lot of damage, it can just make your healer's life a little easier if they're only healing 1 person getting trucked at a time. But again, only do this when you're near the trap, because if you do this in the middle of the room, your spirit runs around. If you do this near a trap, the spirit just gets trapped in the trap. It stays there. You can just easily pick it up for your damage boost, and you aren't taking a ton of damage running around trying to get it. For the magic dot, this is another thing where the healer can only dispel 1 person, so that second person is going to need a personal. Immunities work great here. I think Cloak will also work as well. Ice Block, Bubble, Turtle, all those work great here just to mitigate damage, because it's going to be a rough fight on your healer. From there, you jump down. You already killed these guys, so you don't have to worry. and you're going to our final wing. And I believe, yeah, okay, so it's this double pool here that will spawn your Prideful. The sludge spewers throughout this area, a couple of them. Make sure the withering discharge is kicked because that hurts a lot. And then you're getting your Prideful with this double pull. You can use it down here on these guys. This pull is also it's not too scary, but you can use it there as well. And then this boss, nothing really to note here. It's fairly straightforward. Dodge the hooks, kill the boss, don't be in the slam, kill the ads. And then you're moving outside again to Mordretha, where you have your little Bloodhorn waiting. You can kill him, spawn your Prideful for the boss, and then you've got Bloodlust and Prideful for Mordretha. Definitely recommend having your raid just stack up close to her so you can just sidestep the cones. And again, you want to stay away from the center of this, what is a pentagon, just because the charges that spawn 50% into the fight, those guys are deadly, and the center is kind of a no-no area. Definitely unsafe to be in. But yeah, just try and get your ad spawns close together. Grips work great there. Mass grips, blood DKs, vengeance, demon hunters, anything you can to get those together and just nuke that boss down. And that is it for Theater of Pain. But that's also it for all the dungeons in Shadowlands. There's again some general use Prideful routes for you guys. Work on pretty much every affix combination. They work with any class, any covenant, with the exception of Miss, where you need a Night Fae. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. And you can also check me out on my Twitch channel or my Twitter, both at Tactics. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.